Hi, I'm Mike from Craft Supplies USA, and today we're going to turn a torpedo bat. If you don't know, torpedo bats are quickly taking over the MLB, with many pro players switching to a torpedo bat style. And what is a torpedo bat? It's essentially turning the sweet spot a little further towards the handle and having a slight taper at the end of the bat instead of a constant diameter for the barrel of the bat section here like on this one. If you want to turn just a regular bat, you can follow the same steps we're going to cover in this video, just change your dimensions for the barrel slightly different. But as far as the dimensions go on a baseball bat, it is going to vary depending on the style you like, whether you like a 32, 33, or 34 inch length of bat, as well as the barrel diameter and the amount of taper you have. So those dimensions will vary quite a bit. So if you already have a bat at home that you like, you can use calipers and match those dimensions and then just change the barrel slightly for that torpedo profile. But we'll call out all the dimensions on my bat as we turn it. That way you have a good starting point and frame of reference. In the video, we'll cover all the turning steps and some of the tips and tricks turning a long unsupported piece like this, and how to stabilize it as we're turning for a clean cut, as well as the finishing and dyeing process as we finish our bat. For our blank selection today, a lot of pro bats are either ash, birch, or maple. We're going to be turning a dried piece of maple here. This is one of our baseball bat blanks, and I've already pre-cut this to 33¼ inches. That way I'll have a finished 33-inch bat with a little 1/4 inch nub here on the end that we'll cut off. So adjust your bat size depending on your height, dimensions, and weight. You can go online and find a bat size calculator to get the right size of bat for you, but I'll be turning a 33-inch bat here. So let's get to the lathe, and let's get turning. All right, so we're at the lathe. We got our centers marked on each end of the blank, and you want to make sure you're dead center on these because the overall diameter of this bat is not much bigger than what our finished diameter is going to be over here at our bat section or the barrel section. So make sure you mark your centers really well. And we've got this mounted between centers and our tool rest set up for our spindle roughing gouge at our center working height. So I want that cutting edge on center when I'm on the rest. The other thing you want to make sure is with your tailstock, you don't want to have too much tension from your tailstock because it can cause the piece to have a lot of tension in it. And as we start getting the grip section really narrow, it's going to cause it to flex a little bit. So just snug enough to turn and be secure, but not overly tight. And with our length of bat, you can see we've had to push our headstock and our tailstock to where they're hanging off the bedways, quite a ways. We haven't hit the safety stops on the bedways, so we're still good there, but you will have to shim these out or push them out just a little bit to get this length of bat on. Ideally, we'd use a bed extension, but I don't have one out here, so we're making the best with what we've got here. So they're just sticking off the ends a little bit, but we are still nice and secure. So now that we have this mounted, let's just grab my bat and show you how this is sitting. So this is the orientation of our bat. We're going to be turning our torpedo barrel style up here. This is going to be our grip section. Then we have the knob down here. I want to first start by getting this rough to out of our overall diameter that we want for our torpedo barrel. And I'm going to be shooting for 2.5 inches roughly. You can go a little bit smaller or you can push that a little bit bigger if you want. But I believe the maximum barrel diameter on an MLB bat is 2.61 inches. So we're going to be looking for that nice little taper, moving our sweet spot of our barrel in just a little bit, having it taper towards the end here, and we're ready to start turning. So, all right, so before we start turning, I just want to check the diameter of my blank as it sits right now, and we're measuring a 2.77 diameter right now, and we're shooting for a 2.5, 2.54 diameter for our sweet spot here. That's going to be the widest section of our bat, and then we're going to taper that off. So let's start roughing the barrel end of the section. And the reason I want to turn this first is because if I get my grip section down to that inch and 1/8 diameter, this bat's going to be pretty flexible and start wandering on us a little bit. So I want to turn this as much as I can and get this finished before we start getting this down to size and getting our taper to our barrel. So as far as our turning speed, I make sure you set your lathe to 0 when you start, and we'll bring this up to about 1800 to 2000 RPM. And we'll be using a spindle roughing gouge, and we're going to start truing this up, and then we'll measure it again and see where we're sitting, but we're looking for that 2.5 for our sweet spot right in here. Spindle roughing gouge is the perfect tool for this kind of project. We're just going to adjust our tool rest over, give us a little more working room. Okay, this whole section is trued up, so let's grab our calipers and check. All right, we're 2.75 trued up. All right, so this is going to be the largest diameter of the sweet spot right here, and we're going to have that slight taper away from it, and then we'll start tapering towards the handle, and then we'll taper towards the end of the bat on this side. So let's keep roughing this down and getting to that 2.5 inch diameter. And again, with that spindle roughing gouge, we've got that handle low at our hip. We're cutting down here on this bottom wing, and we're cutting towards the end of the blank. Just nice and light cuts. Because this is a long unsupported spindle, if you push too hard with your tools, it's going to chatter and push against the wood and then kick back a little bit. And it'll cause a lot of vibration. So we want to take light cuts here. Let's stop the lathe and check our diameter again, see where we're at. So we're 2.7, 2.73, 2.7, so we can come down quite a bit still. All right, we're at 2.65. Let's keep going. I'm going to turn this fairly straight and just get us to our diameter that we're looking for, and then we can start creating our taper. And this kiln-dried maple is extremely dusty, so I recommend making sure you have a dust collector running or wear a face mask. All right, we're at 2.53, 2.53, 2.48. Okay, we're right about the diameter we want. I've got just a little bit of a high spot here. I want to level this out, and then I'll start getting that graduated taper off each end of the sweet spot. All right, and this is going to be our section of sweet spot, and then we'll start tapering that off a little bit. And it's not going to be an aggressive taper, just a little bit of a taper from here to here. And then once we hit this last inch or so, we'll definitely start tapering that down a little bit more, and we'll have a nice rounded end on the bat. I'm going to slide my tool rest over, just give myself a little more working room. Let's double check our diameters here. 2.51, 2.51, 2.48, and we start tapering that down right here. Let's check our pencil line. 2.49. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. We've just got that slight taper from here to here. We've got our sweet spot right here. We got a good few inches of sweet spot, and then we're going to start tapering this off and getting down to our grip diameter. So with our grip diameter, it's roughly going to be about this long, and we're looking for 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches. And that is going to depend a lot on what you plan on wrapping the grip with. A lot of grips, you can go thicker grip wraps, thinner. Just make sure you keep into account what kind of wrap you're going to put on your grip, or if you're not going to wrap it, and just do the pine tar on there instead. So I'd say shoot for 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches for our grip section, and then that's going to taper up here towards the barrel of the bat, and it's going to be quite an aggressive taper to get down to that diameter. So now that we have this established, and it's pretty clean cut. Let's start getting some of the bulk of this out of the way and start getting our taper we need down to our grip. All right, so now that we have the barrel of our bat pretty much where we want it, and our measurements again, if we check this, just so you guys have some measurements to work off of, the fattest section of our bat is going to be 2.53, and that's going to be pretty much across this section here, and then it's going to taper off. And down here on the end, we're rocking about 2.28, and then we're going to taper this down to our handle section, and we're going to have about a 1/2 inch of a knob on this end, and I like to go about 12 inches from the knob. So I'm going to mark it from a 1/2 inch here, and we're going to count that to 12, 12 and a half from the very end of our blank with a 1/2 inch knob here. That's going to be our straight section of the grip of the bat, and then we're going to have that nice taper from here to the barrel. So let's start working down this material, getting this rough down, and we'll keep turning. So I don't know if the camera's picking it up, you hear the vibration when we're making a cut. As this starts getting thinner, you might want to put your hand on the back side of the piece and just lightly support it. And that's going to get rid of that vibration sound we're hearing. And we're holding it just light enough to where we can apply just a slight bit of pressure towards the tool, but not so much that it gets too hot to keep your hand there. That's going to just help stabilize the piece slightly and allow that piece to be cut a little bit easier with less vibration. Alright, so we'll just keep roughing this down. If you're getting that vibration, just slightly pull into the blank a little bit with your support hand. Again, we're turning about 1800 to 2000 RPM, and we've got that spindle gouge held with our handle low. We're cutting on this lower wing. Depending on the direction you're going to go, you're going to rotate that tool. And we're just slightly stabilizing the piece with our support hand here. This is a long, unsupported spindle, and it wants to push away from the tool. If you have a spindle steady, this is a good time to throw that on your lathe if you're going to be doing a bunch of bats. That's just a nice, good little support. You can take a lot more aggressive cuts with that spindle steady and make these a lot quicker. I'm going to work on getting my taper here to our grip section just a little bit smoother and refining this curve. I'm going to check my overall length of the grip section because I turned away my pencil mark. So this section from here to here is going to be nice and straight across, the same diameter. It's going to be consistent, about 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches, depending on your grip wrap you're going to put on. And then we're going to have that taper up. So let's just check our measurement here. We should be probably about 2 inches right now. So 1.66, so we're not too far off. About a 1/2 inch less and to get our overall thickness we want here. So we're going to move our tool rest over and let's establish our grip section diameter and get that consistent. And then once we have that established, we'll get our taper up to our barrel just a little bit smoother and get that and get some of the mass out of the way. Make sure this bat's a good weight, not too heavy. One thing you could do when you're establishing this grip diameter of that 1 inch to 1 1/8 inches is you could get your parting tool and part down to that diameter here and maybe in the middle. That way when you go to use your spindle roughing gouge, you're just turning down to that line. But we should be okay just doing it this way. So we're going to keep roughing this down and around, getting this closer to that 1 inch diameter. We're running out of tool rest space, so we're going to slide that over. And then keep in mind, we're going to have about a 1/2 inch for a rounded knob on the end. Just going to true this up. I'm going to mark out my knob width here. It's going to be a 1/2 inch. And I'll use a skew to do a peeling cut to part down the material. That way I have enough room to get a nice semicircular bead here on the end. So with the skew, we'll use a peeling cut. I'm going to remark that pencil line because I can't see it very well. So with the skew for a peeling cut, I'm going to keep that handle really low, get on my tool rest, and then I'm just going to lift the handle. Now we can come in here with our spindle roughing gouge. And I want a little bit of a flared end here towards the knob. Let's go ahead and check our diameter of the grip section, see where we're at. Probably 1.5 inches. Yeah, 1 3/4. Still got plenty of material to remove. I'm going to bring my tool rest over here and start working this taper. Let's check our overall diameter again. So we're at 1 1/4. I'm going to take just under 1/4 of an inch off that section and we can start getting this knob shape we wanted. So I'm going to peel cut this down just a little bit more. I'm going to roll that tool over and use the corner of this cutting edge here to get into the corner we need. And then that knob diameter is pretty high, so I'm going to peel that down. And now let's get our grip diameter established exactly where we want. As you're doing that grip, we want this to be a consistent diameter all the way across. So as you're traversing across your tool rest, make sure you keep that tool at the same depth all the way across, and you should have a pretty nice and flat surface with a consistent diameter. So let's go ahead and check this now. So we're just under 1.2 inches. We're still going to take some more off. Let's grab our calipers again. Still a bit heavy. We're going to keep turning that. Before I get that to that shape I want, I'm going to taper this down just a hair more. There we go. I'm happy with how smooth that taper is. It might still be a little bit heavy once we get our grip to the exact diameter we need. But let's keep roughing this down a little bit more. And now that we're getting really close to our final diameter, you want to take nice, smooth, easy, controlled cuts. It's going to leave behind a little better surface. It'll require less sanding as well. So we're still right about that 1.2. Nice and steady as you go across. That'll help maintain that consistent diameter. All right, we're at 1.16, 1.18, 1.18. So it's pretty consistent across. We're just a little bit heavier in this end. We're going to take probably 1 or 2 more cuts on the grip section. And you can move your tool rest out of the way and feel that bat section. I think that feels pretty good. I think if I added a fairly thick padded wrap on there, it might be just a little bit thicker than I'd like. So I'm going to remove just a hair more, and then we can start blending and tapering this. And this section here is a little tricky because it's a little deceiving as far as the weight goes. You think it needs to be a little bit thicker than it should be, and it adds a lot more weight to the bat than you'll really want. So once we get this in our last couple of passes on the grip section, we'll just blend this a little bit more to the barrel and just lighten that out a little bit. Make sure that balance and the weight of the bat feels really nice. I'm going to move my tool rest over and start working on the flared end here. And the amount of flare that you put in your piece will vary depending on player preference. So do whatever you like as far as how much flare. And if you wanted to do a different knob, like a puck knob, you could have added that as well. But let's get our spindle gouge and we'll start rounding this over. And again, we're going to start with that handle nice and low with that flute basically at 12 o'clock, and then we'll rotate it and then swing that handle over to get our nice rounded profile. And if you're not sure how to roll a bead, check out our spindle mastery video on how to do it. All right, I'm just going to feel that. I think that flare's still a little bit proud. I'm going to smooth that out just a touch. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I've got a good profile on this, all really well cleanly cut with that spindle gouge. I like the amount of flare we have here. Now I'm just going to do a couple finishing passes on the grip section and get that smoothed out just a little bit, and then we can start tapering this and blending the grip to barrel section here and getting that smoothed out. Once we get that done, we'll come back over here to this end and round over the top of the bat, and then we're about ready to sand it and throw some dye on there, just dress it up, make it look pretty. And then we'll go over the finishing process and show you how to finish these bats with some spray lacquer, and let's keep going. Now that we have our knob and the grip established and our barrel established, let's get our nice taper here and blend those two areas together. Lighten this up, just take some mass out of it. Then we can round over the end here, and then we can start sanding. Again, just light support against the blank with your support hand. That's going to keep the vibration to a minimum. And again, we're just looking for light, smooth cuts. Give us a good surface so we don't have to spend a ton of time sanding. So you can see as I'm making the cut, normally you want to go downhill with a spindle roughing gouge. But I've found that the vibration in the piece is a little less when I drag that back. I don't know if it's a little bit more of a slicing cut because it's cutting on that wing on an angle, but it's just a little bit easier to control, and I'm getting a little more shaving off with less resistance as well. Normally you'd flip this over and cut this direction, but I'm getting more vibration doing that. So if I rotate that tool over and then kind of cut uphill, it seems to give me a little bit better surface with less vibration as I'm doing it. So I think we're about there. We've got a really good transition from the barrel down here to the grip. I think the weight's going to be right on the money where we need it. So let's move the tool rest over to this end. We'll round this over, and then I think we're about ready to sand. All right, so let's grab our spindle gouge and we'll round over the end of this. Got that handle low. We're going to start with that flute about 1 o'clock position, and we're just going to start rounding this over. We're pretty close. And then I'm just going to clean up the end of the bat with my spindle gouge just a touch. Okay, I think we're about ready to sand. I'm going to start out with 180, and I'm going to be starting with a full sheet. That way we have tons of sandpaper to just level the surface out and smooth out any tool marks and imperfections. But I think we're about there. So let me go grab some sandpaper and we'll be right back. All right, now that we have our bat turned how we want it, we've got everything turned to the right dimensions we want. And again, we're about 2.53 on the barrel, tapering down to 2.3 on the end here. And then our grip section is just over 1 inch in diameter. Overall bat length is 33 inches. Scale the dimensions for whatever league you want to use your bat in, or whatever feels better for you. As far as the sanding process goes, I'm going to start out with 180, and the technique with sanding something like this, a long spindle, I'm going to hold this over the piece top and bottom, and that's going to give it, it's going to even out the pressure on the paper rather than putting my fingers underneath, and then I can just glide this back and forth across the piece. And I'm going to be using a dust mask while I sand this, just because this puts off so much dust because we're sanding a lot of surface areas. So I won't do much talking during the sanding process. Make sure you have dust collection and your safety glasses on as well. And sanding speed, we're going to be about 700 RPM, 5 to 700. So let's get started. So right now what I'm doing is sanding laterally across the blank with the lathe off, just to get rid of any scratch marks, those circular scratches you get when the lathe's running. That's just going to give it a little bit better look, especially since we're throwing dye on this piece. And I think we're about ready to go to our 220, and then we'll hit 320, and that's about as high as we're going to go on this project. So let's switch over to our 220, we'll throw our mask back on and keep sanding. Now we're going to go to our 320. All right, now that we're done sanding, let's go ahead and throw the artisan chocolate dye on. That's going to give this bat a really nice rich look to it. It's going to be a nice dark brown. And then we'll go over the finishing process, and then we should be about done with this project. So let's get our dye. We're going to need some rubber gloves, our dye, and then a paper towel to apply. All right, before we throw our die on, I'm just going to give this a quick wipe down, get any dust and debris off the blank. And with the artisan chocolate die, it's alcohol based, so it dries really quick. It's got a little bit of shellac in there. And we're going to just want to get a nice even coat on our rag, pretty heavy because we've got a lot of surface area. And then we're just going to start wiping this on from end to end. And that's really going to make this bat look like a nice, expensive bat. I like the plain maple bats, but I think putting this dye on there makes it look really high-end. Looks like a nice Marucci bat. Give it a good look to it, especially once we get our spray lacquer on this piece. And I'm just looking to even out the dye, make sure we get a good saturation across the entire piece. That way we don't have any light or dark spots. And with this being nice and straight grained, it should be pretty even and consistent. And then I'll take this off the lathe just temporarily, just so I can get the ends of our blank. Get each end here saturated. And I'm going to leave the center marks on here. I'm not worried about sanding those off. If you wanted to, you could get a drill, a little hand drill, and just sand this off and get that surface nice and smooth and flat. But I'm going to leave those on there because it's not going to affect the play ability of the bat. So now I've got those done, I can throw this back on. Just get those lined back up in your center points. And then we're just looking to even out the die. If there's any light spots or dark areas, you can blend those. You can get just straight alcohol to blend if you need to. And the great thing is, because this is alcohol based, it dries super quick, and we can get our spray lacquer, and in just a few minutes we can start applying our spray lacquer. So I'm going to get this stuff cleaned up, let it set off to the side, and then we'll grab our spray lacquer and get that prepped. And one thing I like to do with the pieces that I throw dye on before I finish them, I like to just buff the surface with a rag, make sure that shellac is cured, because it is essentially a friction polish with dye in it. And if you wanted to, you don't have to at all, but before I throw the dye on, if you wanted to bone rub the bat up here on the barrel section, you could get a big piece of cow bone and rub that to compress those fibers. And they say it makes the bat harder and you get a little more pop off the bat, but I'm not going to do that on mine. But if you wanted to, go ahead and bone rub the bat first. And for a piece like this, ideally you'd have a spray booth, you know, so you could put nice heavy coats on it and cover a lot of surface area really quick. But I'm just going to be using the Glue Boost spray lacquer. This is their lacquer shot. So what you want to do with this before we apply it is make sure you shake the can real good. And then we're going to go and spray this about 8 to 10 inches away. And this stuff goes on really light, so you can't really overdo it. But just make sure you're about 8 to 10 inches away. And we're just going to go for nice, smooth, consistent passes across the piece. And this will probably take 4 to 5 coats on this. And then we'll let this cure overnight. With the spray lacquers, you want to make sure you're wearing a respirator. This stuff's pretty toxic, so make sure you have a good respirator on before you spray. And I'm just going to give that a good wipe down because I got some dust on it. So we'll spray this, rotate the hand wheel, and just continue spraying. Again, light, even coats. Okay, now that we got our first coat on, I'll let this dry for about 15-20 minutes. We'll come back and hit it again. So one of the nice things about this stuff is it dries really quick, and we don't need to sand between coats. So once you get your initial coat on, let it sit for 15-20 minutes till it's dry to the touch, and then we'll put on a few more coats, and then we'll let it cure overnight. All right, so we've got 2 coats on now. We'll probably add 1 or 2 more, and then we'll let this cure for 24 hours. And again, 8 to 10 inches away, As you're spraying, just be trying to get a nice even coat across the surface and make sure you're wearing your respirator. You can see we're getting a good gloss layer, so we'll let this cure. We'll throw one more coat on, and then this will sit for 24 hours. Alright, so now that that fourth coat is tacked up really good, I'm going to take this off the lathe and just spray just the ends where they were being covered by our centers. Perfect. Now we can set our bat off to the side and let this thing cure for 24 hours, and then if you wanted to, you could wrap it with some grip tape, and then this bat will be ready to use. So we'll just put this off on the table and let this dry. Alright, so we're back at the table. We've let our bat cure for 24 hours and it's ready to use. Hopefully you guys learned some good tips and tricks on turning a bat, and there's so many dimensions and styles of bats out there. Play around with different shapes, weights, and lengths. Obviously keeping in mind whatever league you're playing in has certain specifications for their league. So take a look at their requirements for their bats. But we learned a bunch of good spindle turning skills and how to dress up a bat and make it look really nice and fancy and do a good spray lacquer finish on a bat. But this bat's done, it's ready to use. We'll throw some grip tape on it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section down below. Give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more wood turning videos.